Points of view, which sometimes elevated to shouting. I don't know if wind energy in Stilesbrook is a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's probably somewhere in between, and that's where I am, and I expect that some of you probably are as well. I was on the planning board in 2005 when the wind project in Glebe Mountain was proposed by a consortium of wealthy investors from the Boston area. There was a well-organized, citizen-based petition campaign that showed that the vast majority of Windham resident property owners were opposed to this project. I and other members of the planning board and the select board were trying to decide what action to take when the proposed wind project was withdrawn. The planning board was working on a revision of the town plan already in 2005, and due to the apparent will of the people at that time, we decided to include in that town plan language that prohibited commercial wind in Windham. We did so without a fact-based town-wide discussion of the advantages and the disadvantages of commercial wind energy. I and other members of the planning board and select board based our decision on the petition campaign related to Glebe Mountain. We were told at the time by legal counsel that if sentiment in Windham changed, the town plan could be changed. The draft of the recently completed town plan includes a prohibition on all commercial wind projects in Windham. There have been a number of meetings related to this plan already. The next one is on June 11th. However, 9 years later, we still have not had a fact-based, town-wide discussion, one that weighed all points of view and was specifically focused on commercial wind energy. Considering this history and the current differences of opinion about the Stilesbrook wind project, I decided to organize this meeting. It will be 2 hours for Meadowsend to present themselves, their goals, their plans, and will include at the end 45 minutes to respond to your questions. I previously have given them a list of 40 questions that I have heard from the folks in Windham. They aren't going to be able to answer every question tonight. We only have a couple of hours. This will be a long process. It will be 2 or 3 or more years gathering data needed for Meadowsend to begin to decide whether to pursue this project. So I have asked them to provide as much information as they know now and to provide further details as those details become available. Tonight, please hold your questions until the presentations are finished. We've got a lot to go through. I hope this meeting will be the start of a respectful discussion in town. As a public official, I have to remind myself periodically that the most important part of being a public official is the public, not the official. Those who have chosen to serve the town need to engage and listen to the public respectfully, including those whom we disagree with. There is no excuse for a public official to act in any way that is disrespectful. The public also has to do their part. When discussing this issue or any other issues, we all need to be polite and respectful. None of us knows how this issue will be resolved, but most of us know we will still be living here, and good relationships with our neighbors are very important in a small town. We've all seen what happens at a national level when opposing sides dig in and refuse to cooperate. So for this meeting, please open your minds to the information provided. You should question it critically, but please do so respectfully. Let's make this meeting courteous and useful to all of us. Let's leave here feeling some progress has been made that strengthens us as a community of good neighbors. Let's show ourselves that Windham residents can disagree without being disagreeable. If you cannot act in this manner, I respectfully ask you to leave the meeting at this point. Oop, that was a half. Well, that's enough for me.
You got it.
I'd like to introduce to you 4 representatives from Meadowsend Timberland Limited. These folks have spent their lives living in, and working to preserve New England's working forests. Jamie French is Director of Meadowsend Timberland and President and CEO of Northland Forest Products. He has served on the boards of numerous environmental and charitable organizations, including the National Wildlife Federation Action Fund, the Land Trust Alliance, and the New Hampshire chapter of the Nature Conservancy. Jamie has the forest industry in his blood, as his family has been in this hardwood industry in New England since the 1880s. Jeremy Turner's family has lived in New England for 7 generations. He and his wife live in an off-grid home in Unity, New Hampshire. He has a BS in forestry from the University of New Hampshire, and he has worked for Meadowsend for 18 years and is now the managing forester in charge of 45,000 acres of timberland. He has worked collaboratively with many organizations, including the Vermont Land Trust. Laura French grew up in East Wallingford, Vermont, with the Green Mountain National Forest out her back door. She's a graduate of UVM, where she earned a BS in forest management. She has worked as a private consultant on staff with nonprofit organizations focused on forestry and for the state of Vermont, centered on the current use program. Since 2005, she has worked for Meadowsend and now manages 30,000 acres of forest. Melissa Belcher joined Meadowsend last October to manage its Grafton Windham office. Born and raised in Vermont, she lives in Grafton. She has a BS from UVM in Wildlife and Fisheries Biology and an MS in Wildlife, Fisheries and Conservation Biology from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. She has worked for or with several national and statewide departments and numerous private forestry companies and environmental consulting firms. So I turn this meeting over to Meadowsend.
Well, I want to thank you all that have gathered here tonight to further understand our research of wind we're conducting up at Stiles Brook. I particularly want to thank those folks who've helped make this gathering possible, both citizens and presenters. MTL has structured the scope of this meeting to present the basic process involving our pursuit of learning about wind resource and the important role of community participation. We are joined here by a host of folks that will help convey this information needed to better prepare us all for conductive dialogue. I'm frequently asked what's the most rewarding thing about being a forester. My answer, the opportunity to think and work on long time horizons. As a forester, I not only want, but I need to think and practice science on long time frames. Thanks to working with trees and forest systems, my clock tends to tick in years and decades rather than minutes and hours. As landowners, MTL's business backbone is to own, manage, maintain healthy, productive working forests for future family generations. A business commitment of this nature brings forth challenges of all shapes and sizes. I have learned long time horizons coupled with working forests present the paradox of challenges and opportunities. Today, forests here in Windham and far away face issues of once unimaginable magnitudes. Presently, exotic pests, pathogens, invasive species, forest fragmentation, climate change, eroding timber markets, dissolving workforces, and rural cultures are absolutes. These forces challenge both the economic and ecological feasibility of owning and managing our forests for wildlife, timber, clean air, fresh water, and the greater good. MTL believes strongly in leading by example. With such challenges in place, we can do more than just talk about saving our forests, about saving our Green Mountain identity. We have an opportunity and obligation to do something. Protecting our forests means protecting our rural community, our culture, our Vermont, our world. MTL's track record shows we are leaders in many things, particularly in land conservation and good neighbors. Our commitment to adaptive forest management and forward thinking has led us to explore the use of renewable energy resources for greater land conservation methods. We do not take lightly the idea of harvesting wind energy on Stiles Brook. Like any progressive idea, it requires a fair chance coupled with time, trust, and an open-minded dialogue. This evening, we ask you to learn with us about the process. We ask you to learn about the opportunity we all face at this time. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. I'm Jamie French. I'm one of the family members of Meadowsend Timberlands. There's 3 partners and myself, 2 partners and myself, and I really appreciate the fact that people are here, and I think it says a lot that there's a good crowd here, that there's a real demand for having a good open conversation about the future of our land, which I guess represents something like 20% of the town of Windham. And I just want you to know that I share and can imagine how I would feel in my town about the concerns about any kind of project like this, and I'd want to learn as much as I could about it before I made up my mind. I want to give you a little background about the family. There are 3 generations of owners at MTL. We have about 22,000 acres of working forest land in Vermont. And our lands are in 7 of the 12 counties, 19 holdings in 23 towns. Over 70% of the land that we have in Vermont, which is about 15,000 acres of that land, has conservation easements on it. Our family has, as was said earlier, our family's been in the lumber industry since the 1880s, and my nephew's here tonight, and he's the 5th generation coming along in the family business. And we have been actively involved forever with most of the major conservation and environmental organizations in northern New England. And if you have a chance, when you leave tonight, on the piano there's a map of the partners that we have in various different projects. You can see where our land ownership is scattered around New Hampshire and Vermont and a little bit in Maine. Our dad, who's now 87 years old, has been a lifelong conservationist, and he actually did, I think it was the 2nd easement in the state of New Hampshire, conservation easement, over 40 years ago, which people in other parts of the country can't even imagine that people were thinking about conservation easements 40 years ago, because we were, of course, in New England pioneers in this area, but my dad was one of the first to do it. And one of the things that also amazes people is that when he did that, there was no federal tax incentive for doing that. he did that first easement. It was in Springfield, New Hampshire, and he did it because it was a friend of his who was assembling, who did the other project, and they were trying to protect a wildlife corridor and some significant land next to the Dartmouth forest. Our land in Windham and in Grafton is the largest piece of property that we own. We have a long-term interest in protecting and conserving privately owned working forest lands. These lands have substantial value for recreation and wildlife, which of course you all who live nearby have been enjoying for years as our neighbors. But they also have significant economic benefits from tourism and of course from direct jobs from a healthy forest sector. I've said this before, I said it in Grafton and I'll say it again, that we are completely committed to a conservation easement being placed on this land. My dad purchased the property some 20 years ago because he thought it was just the type of property that could be managed over a long term to, as he's always talked about, grow trees for your grandchildren. The land had been quite severely high graded in the previous decades and was in need of a great deal of rehabilitation forestry. Sure, he was able to buy it at a good price, but with a power line running through the middle of it, 120 acres of land taken for that alone, and the years of rather degrading forestry, you had to have a buyer with a long-term perspective, somebody who was willing to look at 30, 40, 50 years before the real values were going to come back for the forest growing on that land. It's very, very challenging to hold working forests for the long-term investment without looking for alternate income sources. We want to make certain that the next generation is willing and able to hold lands. It's pretty damn unusual for a family. As those of you probably know, most of the larger ownerships of family lands in northern New England have been sold out to investment groups or timber holding companies from Europe or other types of things. There's not that many families left who are trying to figure out how to own private working forest land for long-term and multiple generations. If this was your land, with the changing world and the changing climate, as Jeremy just mentioned, the threat to species, federal tax issues, and ups and downs of a forest industry that, although it's doing better now, 3 or 4 years ago, half the industry in the country went out of business. These are all you would explore. If you had those threats, you'd explore all the options that you have available for keeping your land. This is a very substantial asset for our family. I also want to state right up front that it's very important for everybody here to know that we Meadowsend Timberland, our family, were the ones who asked Iberdrola to investigate the options for wind on this property. We went to them. We had had a success with the property up in Sheffield, that we own that land where the Sheffield Wind Project is on. It worked well. We're proud of it. It was one of the least controversial projects in New England around wind power, and we were interested in seeing what other options we had for our land. It's very important to know that we are very much in charge of this process, and with the final decisions around it will be made by us. Our family's very proud of the work that we've done in both the environmental area, and we're also very proud of the Sheffield project. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. And we will not proceed with this project if it's not a project that meets our criteria for environmental standards and for being a good project that we can be proud of. We all want to learn more, and we have still a lot to learn about this, and we hope that the residents of Windham will maintain open minds and join us in a civil dialogue as we move forward in what will probably be a very long timeline. So I look forward to answering your question later, and I'll pass it on to Melissa or to Laura. Laura.
Good evening. I'm Laura French. I'm a forester working for Meadowsend Timberlands. The last name is just a coincidence. So this portion of the presentation will describe the history of the management and use of this piece of land, leading up to our decision to learn about the potential of producing wind energy here. Stilesbrook Forest is 5,000 acres in the towns of Windham, Grafton, and a small amount in Townsend. So starting in the early 1800s, the land was mainly used for subsistence farming, with at least 18 farms that we know of located here. During that time of agrarian use, land in New England was 80% open, about the opposite of what it is today. After agricultural abandonment in the late 1800s, the forest was allowed to regrow. Then in the early 1900s, Stilesbrook was under ownership of Vermont Talc Company, who mined soapstone here, and then Vermont Marble Company, who harvested much of the spruce to make crates for shipping marble by rail. In 1949, Stilesbrook was sold to Stevens and Thompson's Paper Company. They held the land for over 30 years under an industrial style of management, harvesting pulp from large clear cuts to make paper. It was under Stevens and Thompson in 1968 that an easement to Velco was sold for a transmission line. The easement was a 250-foot wide swath of land over 4.5 miles long that bisects the property. Until recently, Velco maintained one set of transmission lines here, and then in 2010 they installed a second set of lines, doubling their transmission capability. In the 1980s, and for a period of about 15 years, Stilesbrook was under a few different ownerships, part of which was a TIMO. A TIMO is a Timberland Investment Management Organization, basically where the owner acts as a broker to an institutional client, and management is based largely on rate of return on investments. Then in 1996, MTL welcomed the opportunity to purchase Stilesbrook Forest. Unlike previous ownerships, MTL's ownership goals are diverse. Long-term sustainable forest management, maintaining a working forest land that provides renewable natural resources, wildlife habitat, and recreational opportunities. Long-term sustainable forest management strives to balance the operation of a healthy and productive working forest land which provides natural renewable products, ecosystem services such as clean air and clean water, and local jobs. Sustainable forestry practices include measures to protect soils and water quality and maintain or improve natural biodiversity. We at MTL believe in the importance of working forest lands, work that often goes unnoticed by the public because of the quality forestry practices that we utilize. Which brings us to the reason we are all here tonight, to learn about the potential of harvesting wind on Stilesbrook. Today, two of the most significant threats to the long-term sustainability of a working forest land are volatile global economics and climate change. Forest management is not one of those businesses that just come and go. We manage forests on a long time scale, with management plans that outline growing trees to over 100 years old. The importance of maintaining a working forest land cannot be understated. Once you lose the local woods forest and infrastructure, it will be unlikely to return. The working forest component of large pieces of land is what enables them to be maintained as forest land. It pays the carrying cost for keeping this land open. Climate change is real. Not only does it cause sea level rise and more erratic and destructive storms and flooding, it impacts agriculture and our food supply. It impacts human health with increase in heat waves and poor air quality. And it impacts our forests. Higher temperatures, erratic weather, more droughts, heavier rains, all lead to stressed forest conditions, leaving the forest more susceptible to invasive pests such as hemlock woolly adelgid and the emerald ash borer. It also makes forests less productive. Climate change change means we face losing the tree species that are so iconic to our region, like sugar maples. A wind project on Stilesbrook Forest would help mitigate both. It would provide economic stability to help maintain this tract as working forest land, and it provides a natural, renewable resource to help offset society's dependence on non-renewable, carbon-producing energy sources. We at MTL know the importance of a healthy, functioning ecosystem. A tremendous amount of work goes into our forest management to maintain and improve the complex of forest stands and wetlands that make up Stilesbrook. We're proud of our reputation of quality forest management. I invite you to take a look at the posters in the back that illustrate just some of the projects and partners we have been involved with. It is with this same level of respect for the environment that we are studying the possibility of harvesting wind on Stilesbrook. So is Stilesbrook a suitable site for a wind project? There are many levels of criteria to be met, and studies by resource professionals to determine if Stilesbrook is suitable for wind. Studies and data collection will occur on all aspects, including things like wind potential, existing road infrastructure, connection to the electrical grid, hydrology studies, soil protection, sound and aesthetic studies, economic benefits, wildlife, and things like rare and endangered habitat and bird flyways. So is Stilesbrook a suitable site for a wind project? Currently, we're at the end of year 1 of studies and data collection. It will take multiple years of continued studies and data collection to answer this question. At that point, the data will show whether or not Stilesbrook Forest has the potential to support a wind project. If it can, a project proposal is submitted to the Public Service Board, who through a long process makes the ultimate decision about wind on Stilesbrook. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Melissa. I see a few familiar faces in the crowd, and you may see me throughout Windham from time to time. I've been hired from MTL to work within the communities of Grafton and Windham. We, MTL, are committed to working with the people within these communities. And because of that, we have opened an office right in Grafton to make learning resources available to anyone who wants to learn more. We are a team of foresters and scientists. We have selected Iberdrola as the experts on wind to study the wind resource in the Stilesbrook Forest. Open communication is a very important part in the process of learning. We are not just here to provide information and facts. We are also here to listen to concerns and ensure that all questions are answered. With that, I am learning right along with all of you. So please use us as a resource and come visit us at our Grafton, Vermont office. We're located right along the main stretch where the gas station is in Grafton, and the building behind up on the second floor. I'm there Monday through Friday. I encourage you to come visit, and I make lots of home visits, so if you don't feel like coming to Grafton, please contact me, and I'm happy to come meet with you to just talk about things and answer some questions. If you can go to the next. Currently, we have some tours scheduled coming up this week. This Thursday at 6 o'clock and Friday at 2 o'clock, we have some Met Tower tours scheduled. We meet at the corner of Abbott and Wheeler Road right here in Windham. It's a fantastic opportunity to go up to the land, see what the land looks like up there if you haven't been up there. MTL and Iberdrola will be present, so it's a good opportunity to ask some questions and get some information right at the site. We also have our Limster Wind Tour scheduled for this Saturday, the 31st. We have a coach bus reserved. It will be picking people up at the town offices here in Windham at 9 a.m. And we'll be back around 2. Lunch will be provided. But it's, again, a good opportunity to go to an actual wind site, talk to Iberdrola, MTL, ask some questions, and get information. We do ask that you RSVP so we have an idea. And if you could just go to the next, thanks. I encourage folks also, if you can't make it to Grafton, please check out our website. We're currently working on it, constantly updating it. We have upcoming events on there. We'll post our newsletters and additional resources that may be helpful. It's a good opportunity to just another resource to get some information. I also should mention that we have a Q&A box in the back of the room this evening, so we're going to answer as many questions tonight as we possibly can as time allows, and if for any reason your question doesn't get answered, please leave your name and contact information, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can at a later date. It's also a good opportunity, rather than just questions, to submit some ideas, some suggestions, some comments. We read it all, so it will be greatly appreciated. And next, we're going to welcome Iberdrola. Could someone just go through to the next slide and I'll introduce this guys? Thank you. So, we, MTL, have asked Iberdrola to be present here tonight to report on year one of Met Data and tell us a little bit about where we are in the process of things up in the Stylesbrook Forest. We have Don Hammond here with us this evening. Don serves as a Regional Director of Engineering for Iberdrola Renewables. In this role, he manages engineering and technical support for development of wind energy generation projects in the eastern United States. He has over 40 years' experience in various aspects of engineering and project management with an electric utility and with several developers of power generation facilities. Don is a registered professional engineer. We also have Jenny Brio. Jenny has been working with landowners for more than 10 years to evaluate land use opportunities that would allow for both continued traditional uses of land while at the same time producing renewable wind energy. Jenny has experience in New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Maine, and has worked closely with communities and the local, state, and federal officials, reviewing and making determinations on any proposed land use for wind energy production. Jenny has been working with MTL and the folks in the area to share about the evaluation process and answer questions. Thank you.
Well, first I'd like to thank Michael for having this, and thank MTL for having us here, and thank all of you for coming. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and I'm going to pull this out so we can all kind of...
Can I get your last name again, please?
Sorry, it's Brio, B-R-I-O-T. Okay. So MTL's asked us to talk a little bit about, where we are in our evaluation process here for the Stylesbrook tract in Windham and Grafton. So what I've provided here on this board, and folks can look at it after more if you'd like, is an example of the development timeline and process to show that there is a lengthy period of time in which we need to be able to study an area for a potential project. And we are over here in year 1, 2, 3, the data collection of the Met data. And what we have up here as an example is you've heard the MTL mention their Sheffield wind farm up in the Northeast Kingdom. We've shown an example of the time from when Sheffield put up their first tower to the time in which Sheffield was construction and operational in year 9. And the reason I wanted to show this is that where we are now is over here in the data collection and the community outreach portion to determine whether or not there's an opportunity here for a project. So Don is going to talk more about our findings after year 1, but we've found that we do need to study additional data here from the towers. So if it's determined after our first 3 years that there is enough data to pursue the site further, we would then work with MTL to show them the potential areas where the actual turbines could be placed. And once we know and have enough data collection from the test towers as to where the turbines can then go, then we're able to go into our field study phase here, which is typically about a year and a half of studies to go through. You heard some of them mentioned, but I'll just mention a couple. The wetland studies, sound, visual, avian, bat, all of the studies that go into the Public Service Board process that they review to determine whether or not a certificate of public good could be issued for a project here. So that process, just the field studies alone, is about a year and a half. And then at that time, you're able to prepare an application that would then be submitted and reviewed by the Public Service Board. All of the community members would be involved, state agencies, federal agencies, environmental groups, a variety of different folks are involved in that process. And what that shows here is between 2016 and 2019 is that there's a permitting process that is done through the Public Service Board process here. So what I'm trying to show here, and I know I see a lot of familiar faces here and some new ones, is that the question is where would we be placing wind turbines and what are the impacts of those? And where we are here in year 1, 2, 3, that data collection phase, is to where we have not done any of those studies because we have not completed our data analysis. So when you want to know where, it's hard for us to know at this time because we have not completed these field studies. So we're not able to get to that point until we complete and start doing the field studies. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the timeline, which is, as you can see, it's rightfully so. It's lengthy. It's transparent. It's involved. I'm going to hand it over to Don to share with you what we found here in the first year, and then I'll try to answer any questions you have during the Q&A on the process or where we're at, where we go from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. And again, thank all of you for the opportunity to be here. It's certainly gratifying to see so many people.
And I'm sorry, can I get your last name, please?
Hammond, Hammond. Wind resource assessment, year 1. As I'm sure everyone is aware, we went through a state permitting process and got approval to install 3 meteorological towers up in Stylesburg Forest. Those were installed in April of 2013. And when they were installed, we pretty much indicated that we needed at least 1 full year of data before we really could say much of anything about the results of wind. They have been there for a year. Our meteorologist has had an opportunity to at least go through a cursory look at the data. There are huge amounts of data that have been collected. So the full assessment is something that requires lots of man hours and lots of machine time to go through and review. But we really need the data in order to know whether it's worth recommending to MTL to make a major investment in construction and operation of a wind project. First, we need to understand what the wind resource is. Is the wind resource sufficient to produce enough power to be economic to justify the capital expenditure of the project? And we need to have a high confidence in that wind and the amount of wind energy that you measure in 1 year. You never know for sure whether that is a typical year, whether it was a good year, whether it was a bad year. So you need a full year because the wind changes throughout the seasons, but you need more than 1 year to know that you have a repeatable and predictable amount of energy, again, before making a decision for a major capital investment in a project. And site suitability. There are a wide range of turbines that are manufactured around the world by different people. They come in different sizes, they come in different heights, they come with different sizes of rotors. They are all designed for different types of wind regime. So until you understand the full aspect of the wind, you can't even select a turbine. And so understanding the data enough to be able to make all of those decisions and have that confidence is the reason we start, the reason we install the meteorological towers, We think the wind is there. MTL thinks the wind is there. We're in the process of proving whether it is or isn't. In the wind resource assessment, the picture in the lower right is from one of our tours last year. MTL conducted several tours up to the meteorological towers, similar to what is going to be happening on Thursday and Friday of this week. A chance to go up and actually get up close to one of the meteorological towers. The view on the left is looking up. You can see anemometers at various heights. There's lots of instrumentation looking at wind from multiple directions, looking at horizontal wind, looking at vertical wind. All of this information is critical in understanding and characterizing the wind itself. I think you can move on. So what did we learn? We installed 3 meteorological towers. It's hard to see on the slide, but there's some yellow ovals overlaid over the topographic map, and inside there, if you can see, there's some yellow printing. Those are the locations of the 3 meteorological towers that were installed. The ovals are generally areas that have typical or have relatively similar elevations, and we're expected to have relatively similar wind resource. The Met Tower 1, which is the northernmost, pretty much due east of Windham, is the highest elevation on the site. We expected the highest wind, average wind speeds to be measured there, and indeed that is what was recorded. In the center, our Met Tower 2 is kind of the middle range of elevations within the site, and again we had relatively good wind in that area. The Met Tower 3 which is in the town of Grafton, had the lowest elevation, was anticipated to have the lowest wind speed relative to the other 2, and that's representative of what we measured over the first year. So what does all that mean? The average wind speeds look promising in all 3 of those areas. So that's certainly very, very positive news for MTL in looking at the possibility of installation of a commercial scale wind project. But we found turbulence in the wind stream. The terrain is complex. Every time the wind goes over a ridge, it tends to bend and twist, and turbulence and wind turbines don't necessarily go well together. Different turbines have different amounts of capability to deal with turbulence, but at this point in time, that's something we need to understand more. The month of April this year, we don't necessarily understand why, but the data that we collected in April at all 3 locations really didn't look like what we collected the other months of the year. There again, we need to understand that. Is the wind always different in April? Did something happen this year during April that caused it to be different? So again, another area that we really need more data in order to fully understand before committing and saying, yes, we think we want to put a wind tower. As Jenny mentioned, the typical project development process assumes 1 to 3 years of collecting data to get to the point where you can be confident that there is a good amount of energy to be captured, where you have the ability to say the wind matches up with the characteristics of a certain wind turbine, so that the wind turbine will successfully be able to convert the wind into energy, not have mechanical difficulties because it can't withstand the specifics of the wind current. So we have completed year one, but as Jenny alluded to, and as I've indicated, we are not in a position at this point to be able to make a recommendation to MTL of yes, we should go ahead, or no, we shouldn't. We need more data to be able to understand fully whether what we've measured is typical, what we can expect over a 20 or 25 year life of a project, and be able to then make a decision as to what type of turbine would go in, whether it is more smaller turbines or fewer number of larger turbines. We think that assuming that we can answer the questions as far as the turbulence and the character of the wind to be able to site a turbine, depending on the size, it could be 15 turbines, it could be 30. That's probably the upper and lower bounds of how many turbines would be installed. But again, we don't really know for sure, and we can't specify a number or location until we know more about the wind and get to that point of getting into specifics as to what turbine you would want to apply to the wind resource.
Thank you.
Okay?
And thank you. And just in closing, based on what Don has said, as a result, and we've let MTL know this, that we do not intend to proceed with any site-specific environmental studies over the next year. So the next year will be just data collection. So we do not have a specific layout where we'll go out and do specific visual studies or wetland delineations, etc. So we certainly hope MTL will continue to ask us to participate in meetings with them or any type of discussion that they'd like to have, or Met tours, or whatever community members find beneficial at this time. We're certainly here as a resource, but we will not be working specifically at the site on specific environmental studies at this time. And thank you again for having us and listening to us this evening.
Thanks, Jenny and Don. Also with us this evening, we have Aaron Kosicki from the Public Service Department. We asked him to come just to talk a little bit about the process from the state level. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Hi, thanks. I'm Aaron Kosicki. I'm a staff attorney with the Department of Public Service. Just as a quick primer, there is the Public Service Board, which is the state quasi-judicial board that evaluates petitions. In this instance, it would be a petition to build a project. If and when it comes to that, they will be the ones making that determination. I work for a different agency, that is the Department of Public Service, and we are charged with representing ratepayer and state interests before the Public Service Board in all dockets. So in other words, we advocate on behalf of the state for the broader state interest in front of the board. It's very easy to confuse the two, and I hope that doesn't happen going forward, but I don't want to confuse them. Just on a very general level, the Public Service Board, if and when MTL decides to file a petition to build a project, which I think Iberdrola and MTL have made very clear, and I want to make this very clear, will be in the years in the making. It will not be very soon. If and when we get to that point, the Public Service Board will be evaluating a proposal from MTL to determine whether or not the project will be in the public interest and be in the public good. And if and when it is found that it is, they will grant what's called a Certificate of Public Good, or in other words, it's called a CPG. And a CPG is a broad state permit that allows the project to move forward in construction. And the board will typically condition the CPG in such a way that it puts limitations on what the petitioner can and can't do with respect to the operation and construction of such a project. Specifically, there's a statute in the Vermont Statutes and Codes. It's Title 30, Section 248. It's typically just known as Section 248. And Section 248 sort of is the statute that's used to guide the board when it wants to determine what, how, and where to site energy generation facilities, and that would include a project like this. And under 248, the board has to make a number of affirmative findings in order to guide its way to determine whether or not a particular project is in the public good. And there's a number of criteria that are outlined in Section 248. Those criteria include things such as whether or not the project provides an economic benefit to the state and its citizens, whether or not it helps with it comports with orderly development of the region, aesthetic issues, public health and safety issues, a whole host of environmental concerns are looked at. There's a broad range of issues that the board looks at. And it takes that inquiry very seriously. And what it does is a petitioner will provide testimony to the board outlining why it thinks each one of those criteria has been met and why the project is in the public good. Other parties, the department, and any other party that wants to, that is successful in becoming a party in the process and the proceeding is allowed to file testimony as well. And there's a contested hearing before the board typically. And in such an instance, anybody that provides testimony has to be put up for cross-examination before the board, and there's a contested process, and all evidence is weighed by the board, and at the end, they finally make a determination as to whether or not a CPG should be issued. And I don't really want to go into a lot of detail about those criteria right now, because like I said, this is something that if and when a proposal is made, it will be years down the road, and I'm sure that we'd be more than happy to come and visit with everybody and talk about this criteria moving forward.
We hold questions.
Yeah, we can.
until
Fine.
then. Thanks.
I just want to touch base real quickly on a pretty critical issue that the board has, which is input from the affected communities, particularly with respect to generation facilities, is very critical to the board in making its determinations. And there are a number of ways for the board to sort of tap into the concerns of those affected communities. The first way is that any individual or any group of individuals can petition the board to become a party in the proceeding once the proceeding gets going. If that happens, and a party is granted intervention status, they become a full-fledged party. That means they can file testimony. That means they can cross-examine witnesses. That means they file briefs. That means they are a full-bore party. And they have all the obligations, they have to meet all the obligations that any other party in the proceeding has. Those parties, their briefs, their input is part of the evidentiary record. In other words, that information that those parties give to the board can draw on that when making their findings and making their final decision on the issue. On the other hand, there's also another way to be involved, and which is very critical to the board as well, which is you can file public comments at any juncture. And I would say right now, even at this juncture, in this early stage, given that there is a CPG that's been issued for the Met Towers, the board welcomes comments, concerns from the public at any time. And if any party wants to do that, they can file it directly with the board. It will be treated as a public comment. It informs the board about what the issues are, but those comments do not become part of the evidentiary record. The board can form questions based on those concerns, and often it gives the board the ability and it informs the board in terms of what types of issues affected communities have with a particular project. But those comments can't be drawn on as part of the basis for the board's decision. The only thing I would say right now is if anybody is contemplating filing public comments, two things. One is feel free to contact my office. I have cards. I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards and talk about sort of the mechanics of doing that. And that feeds into the second point, which is if you file anything at the board, please file a copy with the Department of Public Service so that we know, because it also helps to inform our positions on the issue. It's very helpful. There's a number of smaller issues that I could talk about, but I think it's probably outside the scope of what we want to talk about today. Again, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody afterwards, I'll stick around. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron. Also with us tonight, we're pleased to have a few community members from the Lowell community, Pamela and Mike Tatro. I don't know if you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Pam Tatro. I'm a town official for the town of Lowell. I am the town treasurer. I've served the town of Lowell for the last 14 years. And I was asked to come and speak because we went through this same process. We had 3 Met Towers installed and went through everything that goes from there as far as the testing, the certificate of public good, and eventually to a town vote. The town of Lowell voted, we have 744 parcels in the town of Lowell. We have a checklist of, I think, 560 people. It's very rare at town meeting that we have more than 100 people actually come to town meeting. The year that we voted for the wind turbines to be installed and our agreement with Green Mountain Power, we had 476 people come to town meeting to vote. So it was quite a turnout from the normal town meetings that we usually have. And at that turnout, we had 75% in favor of going ahead with the project. We entered into an agreement with Green Mountain Power for 25 years. We do receive a lump sum amount of $535,000. That amount does go up by $32,000 every 5 years. For the town of Lowell, as I said, with 744 parcels, our municipal tax was, I think, $460,000. So we actually received more. We have taken an extra $80,000 and set that aside because we know it won't always pay for the whole amount. Things will progress as our economy and budgets increase each year. So last year, the town of Lowell had a 0% tax rate for municipal tax. They still had to pay the education tax, which is about 70% of everyone's tax bill. We are about 50-50 as far as being resident, non-resident property owners. And I just didn't know if there was anything that I might be able to answer that you might have questions or worries about. We had a lot of people, concerned about their property values before this project went in place. We are in the midst of a town-wide appraisal right now. It will be completed in June. And people will receive their new appraisals hopefully by July 1st. At this time, the state appraiser that we have is Doug MacArthur, and he has worked diligently. This is a 2-year town appraisal that he's worked on with our listers. We have 3 town listers. And they've reviewed all of our property sales, positive, negative, tried to see if there was any cost studies that were directly impacted from the wind turbines because they are up and operational. They came online November of 2012. And at this point in time, we've had studies, we've had sales going both ways. But we could not determine that they were impacted directly by the wind turbines. So for this year, for this townwide appraisal, we will not be making any adjustments for lowering property values based on the wind turbines themselves. As a small town, and it's a small town here, we had 4 foreclosures in our town. I've been treasurer, as I said, for 14 years. It's very rarely that a small town has that many foreclosures. That had nothing to do with the wind turbines. That was based on economy. And I just think some people automatically get upset and nervous about their property values. They need to blame something or look at something. And from a project that started with Met Towers and now has an operational, we have 21 turbines in our town. They're 63 megawatt facility. And we have not had that experience. And I've attended many community forums. We had outreach meetings. We tried very hard before our vote to make sure that everyone had enough information to make an informed decision. Now, saying that, this year at town meeting in March, we had an article. There's a very small group of opposition, approximately 10%. which equates to, like I said, there's only 600 voters in there. And they brought an article, again this year, asking the town of Lowell to reject the Green Mountain Power Project, Kingdom Community Wind, to show their opposition that they've destroyed our mountains, it's ruined our town. It actually, in an article the day after town meeting, I was commented, and it was, our town was called the ghetto town of Lowell, that we're just a small town, and basically we're stupid and ignorant and didn't know what we were voting for. But at that town meeting, just this past March, they voted again, and as I said, the opposition wanted us to say it's ruined our town. The town voters did not say that. It was 78% of the people there still in favor of the project after it's up and operational. So we went to 75% in 2010 before it was operational to 78% still in favor. So if you're worried about as this process goes, I encourage you to go on the Tour de Lemster. I came 3 hours, but anyone is welcome to drive up north towards the Canadian border and come to Lowell, to the Kingdom Community Wind. We do have a huge facility, and I think that instead of just, at this time, it's so new, do not be closed-minded, be open. Go and see and hear for yourself. Don't listen to just what the neighbors are saying or an opposition group that's coming and pressuring you. Go and see and hear for yourself. I have gone personally many times up the mountain and stood, right underneath them. But you need to go and see for yourself. When you hear somebody say of the destruction, go on up and see. Last year we had flash flooding that took out some of our roads in the town. I went up to the project. 3 days after that, you can see all the stormwater drainage, everything was perfect. Everything was still in place. They had done an excellent job. We've gone through a lot of scrutiny. We've worked with A&R, everything that has been required. And you really need to see for yourself what the facilities look like and how they are before you make a judgment. That way you can be informed if it does prove to be a viable project here in this community. And don't let other neighbors, I think that they were right in the opening, is to be civil with each other. It's a project. You're looking for the best of your community, and it's not worth not speaking to somebody for the next 10 years. So, if I can be of any help, that's my part of it as the town treasurer. And now my husband, who gets to hear all of my side of it, but he can form his own opinion.
Everything she said was true. I'm going home later, so you can expect that. So, I'm Mike Tatro. I work for a company called Pool and Grain. It's a family-owned feed company. We're in our 4th generation, and so I can very closely relate to the French family and in many regards. And we're very proud of being a family company, and I'm sure you folks are as well. But that again. So, about ourselves and a little bit about the project. My wife and I are diseased with supporting our community. I came home a week or 2 ago and actually told her, it's like, okay, something's going to give. We've got to, we can't keep up. I have a pretty entailed job. We support our fairgrounds, which once you start with those programs, if you're willing, she's the treasurer, I'm the president. We work with 30 directors, which boils down to about 10. Countless hours, but investing in our community, investing in agriculture, which is important to me. We also support VAST, which is a recreational sport that we put as much work time into it as we do playtime. We both are involved in town. She's much more involved than I am, but I actually joined the Planning Commission and now chair. And it was important to me. I'm a believer that you can't just ridicule that if you're going to have an opinion, you really need to put the effort in and be a part of the decisions and listen to people and try to be open. So we're very much entrenched in our communities. We're both Vermont bred, and we've been there our whole lives, so that makes us, as you guys can probably relate to, a bit stubborn. very independent, and you know, we think pretty honest. That's our goal. We're proud of our families. We're proud of our kids. We have our kids living in our town. My parents live in our town. Our whole family lives within a 2-mile radius. So for us to support a project like this, we're about 1.5 miles from the turbines. We had to feel like, at least in our minds, it was a good thing to do, not only for ourselves and our family, but for our community. And I'm past that half point in life, so I'm really worried about my kids and my granddaughter at this point. Especially my granddaughter, the kids less, but that's okay. So my biases, and I'll just go through this quickly. I'm very biased to supporting business, and I hope that as a community, not only this project, maybe if it's a viable one, but other businesses, that we start thinking in this state about supporting business. It is extremely frustrating to try to produce jobs, and to produce jobs that are good, that provide health insurance and retirements, and give people opportunity, and to yet come up against some of the legislative challenge and some of the local town issues that we have. Very, very frustrating. So I'm very pro-business, and I'm very pro-business when we have an opportunity to be a part of a family-type business. Small family businesses are not 2 people any longer. Their families are bigger. Property rights are important to me. You know, my family has, since they've come to the States and been in Vermont, have owned property, and we try to be respectful of our neighbors' property and of their rights and of their investments. And we feel that the systems are in place that should manage and protect the environment and due diligence so that there's some assurance. And although we appreciate the public opinion, I think that with that, much of the rights of the landowners that have owned property for a long time, that are trying to conserve or do good things with it, really come out on the short end of the stick. So one of my objectives with being on the zoning commission is to look for the best interest of the town, and at the same time in doing that, the long-term marriage of that is looking for the best interest of the folks that own the property in the town, which probably most of the people here do. The last thing that is important to me is I think it's important that we start being self-sufficient. Nothing against Hydro-Quebec or importing or exporting, but it's really important to me that what we can do ourselves, that we're self-sufficient. And that comes with some changes. None of us can get where we want to go without making some changes, and most of that has to start with each individual personally. The last thing I will say, and I'll close with this, is that we felt, and the majority of the town felt, that the project was well done, that what was promised was delivered, that it's something that most of us are very proud of. We appreciate our mountain before, and one of the arguments was that we're going to lose the scenic part of that. And to be honest with you, it's actually attracted a lot of folks. And they're very interested in seeing Vermont make the commitment that we made. The one negative thing that I will say that is really been a problem, and I'm glad that Michael opened the way he did. It's really about the politics. It's about try to decide for yourselves, try to decide as a town. You're going to have people coming in from neighboring towns and stuff. We're here today. I'm not paid. We have nothing other than we're advocates on the things we're talking about. But you're going to have people try to influence you because they've taken that up as a mission, and they're going to honestly not necessarily have all the facts right. So I'd highly encourage you to keep your minds open. I'm not telling you that you need to vote for or against it, but keep your minds open, because I do think there's a different future, and I think it's going to take some different approaches and perspectives going ahead. So if there are questions for me later, please feel free to ask.
Thank you. We appreciate the fact that you guys drove 3 hours to be here with us tonight. We also, last but not least, we have Mr. Teddy Hopkins with us this evening. He's hiding in the crowd. Teddy's from Reedsboro, Vermont.
Yeah, Mr. Taco, very well put. You took half the words out of my mouth. In Reedsboro, well, first of all, I've been a select board member for 11 years, and 7 of them 11 years have been going through the process with the company Deerfield Wind, a subcomponent of Iberdrola. And since its infancy, when I first got the first telephone call, the select board met with officials, discussed the matter several times. We had some informal hearings, and coupled with the fact that the land was on Green Mountain National Forest, it made it a federal project also. So a lot of the hearings were held in Reedsboro were because of the federal regulations as well. Some of it seemed a duplicate. Well, and that was in late 2004, maybe early 2005. Well, we put a non-binding Australian ballot, which might be contradictory in terms, the people to vote in March of 2006, whether they would be in favor of such a project. And that was an expansion from the nearby town of Searsburg windmills into Reedsboro. 222 people voted that day out of about 500. And 191 said yes and 31 said no on that ballot. A copy of which I have with me if you wish to look at it. So that said, we've been, a good partner with Deerfield Wind, and it's been held up. The timetable you see here is a little extra long with the one in Reedsboro because of the fact of the federal government's involved. It's been going on since, I'd say, maybe 2004 is my guess, and it's still going on in federal court through some appeal process. I believe, I'm not sure if someone can correct me, that they had to adjust the length of the blades. That was from what it was originally, and that triggered another process again, over and over again. So the politics of it, as Mr. Taco, speaks to, is very true. What people cannot get through persuasion, trying to persuade you one way or the other without you having your own open mind, they'll try to get through the court systems and tie it up to make it so infeasible that maybe the next developer does not want to do it and throw their hands up and leave town. But to sum it up, the people in Reedsboro are very proactive with the wind. The reasons, I can't say exactly for everybody that voted that day, 222 people, but I think they believe they want to get we want to keep something stateside. We don't want to support foreign terrorists or what have you, or the price of oil being gas gouged or what have you. We want to keep something here. So the expansion was supposed to be 7 units in the Reedsboro at 2 megawatts apiece. There's 14 megawatts, and the contract that we negotiated, which is public information with the municipality, was $11,000 per megawatt. So Reedsboro stands to get into the municipal budget a minimum $154,000 a year, which is probably about 20% of our municipal raise and appropriate. So it's it's a financial shot in the arm. Not that would be the only reason why you'd want to think about it, but it does help with the ever economic situation in town. So thinking anything about that, I can answer to. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, now it's your turn. Before, we'll be taking about 45 minutes of questions. I will call on individuals and give everyone a chance to speak before anyone speaks twice. I want to remind you to be respectful when you ask your questions. Also, stick to asking a question. Please do not make a speech. This will not be your only opportunity to express your views. This is only the beginning of our work to resolve this issue. And when you do ask a question, please state your name and the road that you live on. So, we're open to questions.
My name's Sarah Berger. I live on Old Shady Road, and I'm actually from the Kingdom, and have seen a different side with all due respect to the Tetros. So my question is, in Sheffield and potentially here, when the energy goes into the regional grid to Green Mountain Power, we then buy it back, or does it go, say, to other parts of the country to be sold to other municipalities?
So you are correct, it does go into the wholesale market grid, which is the wholesale grid system in Vermont. And Vermont is part of the New England Independent System Operator, which is the New England ISO, and that makes up the New England states, and that power is then used, so it's in those states as needed. So here, if we were hypothetically to have turbines and connect into the existing power lines, that power would go in there, and then it would be used where it's needed, and then continue to go on to where it's needed next, sort of the laws of physics and how that works. So, so when you think of power being produced in Vermont, the state of Vermont, you should think about it as being shared amongst the New England region. Does that help?
Anyone else? Yes, sir, John?
Yes, my name is John Began, and I live on West Windham Road. And I had a question for the Tetros. Do you have an idea how many homes there are in Lowell that are within the impact zone, say 2 miles of the turbines?
There are 2 homes directly, one is 0.7 miles and one is 0.9 miles. As far as actually, there's only 2, those are the 2 closest ones. As far as total homes, I do not know that answer. I could get that answer. I personally live about 1.5 miles from the turbines, and I can see them right from my house. I cannot hear them from my house, and I don't find them offensive.
Jim?
I'm Jim Morey. I live on Wheeler Road. I also have a wildlife degree from the University of Vermont, and like all these fine professionals here, and I have spent hundreds of hours studying this issue.
Jim?
And I would like to ask the Tetros something to follow up with what this gentleman said. So the first question I've got is, how long did it take for the Lowell project to be built out from the time that they applied for their permit until they started construction?
I believe from the Met Tower permit until construction to completion was 8 years.
They started in 3 years though, right?
From their first Met Tower.
And the town center is how far from the towers?
2.5 miles.
2.5.
Yeah, from Route 100, if anyone was going down through there, you can see them from our office.
And what was the guaranteed distance that Green Mountain Power put in their application, distance to a residence, that they would be how far away?
I don't know for sure. It could be 3,000 feet.
1.3 miles. And then I would like to ask
Jim?
people from Iberdrola what would be their guaranteed
Jim?
setback distance.
Jim?
These are questions, Michael.
I'm,
And there's a difference between Lowell and Windham.
I appreciate these are questions. These are absolute questions. I just want to give everybody an opportunity
So my last
to ask
question was, what is
questions.
the guaranteed setback that you would assume from these towers? It's something we need to know. Everybody in this room needs to know this. These ridges are 1/4 mile from town.
Jim, you've asked your question.
Okay. Can I have an answer, please?
Likely would be a minimum of at least 1/2 mile.
Questions? That's it? Nobody got any? Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Smith, and I live on Chase Road. And I just had one quick question. I mean, you said in April of this year was an odd month. Was it better or worse? I'm just curious of what the wind, you said, I'm just curious.
Good question.
It's a very interesting question. I don't have the answer for that. I am not the meteorologist who's gone through this. The meteorologist in his official report said April was funky. I was not able to interpret that.
Is it possible to get an answer to
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Yes.
You'd like an answer, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you just state your name one more
process?
time for me?
Jennifer Smith, Chase Road.
Thank you.
Yes.
John Hoover, I live on White Road. This is from Mr. Kasicki. Would you comment, please? We've heard from two different communities where they had community votes that were polled in town meeting in Australian Valley. How, you've told us that that carries weight with the PSB, but they can overrule that, can they not?
So there's sort of two ways to answer that. The first is that, well, no, I mean, under the statute, under section 248, the Public Service Board must give due consideration to the recommendations of the town as they're spelled out in the town plan. Okay, so that's one component. The other issue is that the input from the town informs the board in terms of their focus and scope of their inquiry when they're reviewing a petition. I don't know if that answers your question.
Rich Shenever, Wheeler Road. Is there any way we can get definitive distance from each of our properties to the closest potential structure?
When we get to the point that we have a layout, absolutely. Like when we actually have a turbine location, we can do that for each individual home.
When do you expect that a possibility? I mean, I know the net towers are in place, but it impacts a lot of our decisions on what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't know. We saw the map. It's kind of vague because they're just dots and it's just proposed.
We have not proposed a layout.
As some of us know that there's a proposed thing that went out. And
But it's not proposed by
I
us or
understand
MTL.
that. So we would have to
with our
wait
data.
until you actually decided to find that information out.
We would have to wait until we have enough information in order to do that. And so the layout that's been sent out does not incorporate the data from our tower.
I understand that completely.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what timeline do you think that would be? A year, 2 years?
It would be at least probably 2 years. It's up here where I kind of showed year, during that
But at that
study
time,
phase.
we'd all get information as to how close.
Absolutely. That will be an opportunity when we can actually come here with a map and show you exactly where they would be. We would have done visual studies. We will have done sound studies. We'll have done, you'll know the distance. All of those questions will be answered, at that time.
Okay.
I'd be just guessing, at this
No, respectfully, I understand.
point. Thank you.
Emma.
Emma Mora from Hitchcock Hill Road. Question for Mr. Kaczynski. You said that you make the things public as to why they are good for the public good. Is there a place we can find that information, let's say on these other sites, that you think that these wind turbines are good for the public good?
I want to be clear about what I said. The board...
Another lawyer.
The board makes a determination, when it reviews a petition, the board is at its core making a determination as to whether or not a particular petition for a construction of a project is in the public good. In doing so, it reviews a large body of evidence. All of that evidence is public. All of the board's orders are public. Everything is part of that process is a public document, and you can review. You're more than welcome to review all of that evidence that was reviewed by the board in the past in those other projects, whether it be Lowell, Sheffield. You can also read the board's thinking about all that evidence and how it reached its ultimate conclusion and looking at its final orders, which are also public documents.
And like it has criteria, like what is the public good,
Yes.
energy for the public?
Yes, if you were to read a board order in any of these projects that have been approved by the Public Service Board, they go through criteria by criteria and they discuss each one. And they say, under this criteria, this is what we're looking at. This is what the evidence says. This is what this side says. This is what another party says. This is what we think about it. This is how we evaluate the evidence. This is the conclusion that we reach with respect to this particular criteria. Then they move to the next criteria. It's very methodical, and they do that with each criteria. And in the end, they make a determination overall whether or not the project is within the public good and whether or not it's appropriate to grant a petitioner a certificate of public good. In some instances, they will say, we think it's appropriate to grant a certificate of public good, however, we're going to condition the certificate of public good in a certain way to ensure that there is some sort of limits on what the petitioner can and can't do with respect to the operation or construction of the facility.
Great.
Greg Noel, live on Burgundy Pond Road. I have a follow-up to the last question. Can you tell us, for example, will the commission look at this permitting process and whether to grant the permit or not in the same way, with the same intensity as they did with extending the license of Vermont Yankee? Are we talking about the same kind of a process here?
First off, those two proceedings there's many differences between the two. So I think first off, I think it's comparing apples to oranges. With that being said, in my experience in front of the board is meticulous in reviewing a petition of this magnitude. If MTL were to file a petition, and I can't speculate as to what the board may or may not do, so take this with a grain of salt, I would think that the board will take it very seriously. At this point, there are a number of projects that have been approved within the last decade. The board will draw on that experience. They are also having a number of other sort of more generalized investigations into some other issues with respect to wind right now. They will draw on that experience as well if and when a petition is presented to the board. I think the answer is they will be very meticulous. I don't know how that compares to the Vermont Yankee proceeding, but I think it's fair to say that the board was very focused in that proceeding as well.
Thank you.
Asa.
Asa Goodman, I live on Old Cheney Road, and I guess I'm curious as to how long, if this were approved and you started building them in 2019, or they were completed in 2019, what's the expected lifespan, and then what happens when they wear out? They just replaced and they're just there in...
Well, there's the expected lifespan is typically 25 years, and what we do, and obviously none of us know what the next 25 years looks like, and we actually haven't had a project that has even been 25 years to come to this point yet. But what we do put in place is what's called a decommissioning fund. So there's actually a bond, or there's money set aside to decommission these projects. If and when, whether it be in year 10 for some reason, or year 20 or 25, it's anticipated that they would either be removed, or they would be improved, or retrofit, whatever it might look like in year 25. I think typically the infrastructure is already there as far as the collection for it. But if for any reason at the end of year 25 they're no longer able to be used, and they no longer serve a purpose in whatever our technology looks like, then they would be taken down.
Right after this one, we got a new one here. Howard.
Howard Iris, Windham Road. I have a question for the tacos. You guys, your town negotiated a very nice payment arrangement for the wind towers. At what point in the process did the town begin negotiations to work out your payments?
Well after the Met Towers had done all of their studies and gone through.
And what were those negotiations like? Was an offer made and you just accepted it? Was an offer made and you asked for more? How did it work?
I can't specifically say because I was the select board. I was there at most of those meetings, and it was between Green Mountain Power, and we hired a town lawyer, and a lot of that went with him. I think there were 3 or 4 different rewrites, and then amendments after that fact as to what our actual contract looked like.
And what negotiating clout does the town have in terms of, asking for more or accepting less?
I really don't know. Our select board was the one that was dealing with that. I just kind of was, I know what we were going to get after, so as a treasurer I had to make sure that we collected that money, and we did, but the select board was doing the negotiating, and our lawyer.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's a follow-up question to the funding of the decommissioning funding. Is that a pre-funded and set aside, and who holds the money?
It's been, well, I think it varies depending on the projects. I'm probably not answering correctly for what's been done at Lowell or Sheffield because I don't know. In the most recent project I worked on and that was built, it was actually set up so that once the cost to decommission was greater than the price of the steel, then we had to post that amount of money in a security into like an escrow type account, and then basically as time would go on, that fund would continue to increase. But that specific project, that was the way that was arranged. It's usually a security or an escrow, a bond of some sort.
It's 100% funded based on the price of steel?
Well, based on the price to decommission. So in this situation, the value of the turbines was greater than the price to take them down. So we didn't have to post yet. But it's reevaluated every 2 years. I can't speak to I cannot speak to Sheffield or Lowell here. But I can follow up with you on that one too.
Yes.
I'm Carolyn, live on Townsend Road in Grafton. My question is for Mr. Hammond. You said that there was a lot of turbulence up on the mountain. I would like to know if there's any connection between that turbulence and the amount of sound that a wind turbine produces.
I'm not sure if I'm completely qualified to answer that. I'm not a sound expert. Just to clarify, I think I indicated that there was some turbulence, not a lot of turbulence. We need to determine more as to how much turbulence is there and how that would impact the operation of a turbine. The turbulence, I would think, probably could be an impact in the sound emissions. The level of that, there's no way to predict, no way for me to predict. We do extensive sound modeling in the siting process of any turbine we put in that takes into account the wind speeds, the terrain, the vegetation, and I would expect that would be something that would show up in the wind modeling that's done. Obviously, if we anticipate greater sound levels coming from a turbine because of turbulence, you would be looking at larger setbacks from sensitive properties. But it's much too early in the process to say anything definitive at this point.
Walter.
Walter Woodruff, Windham Hill. I've lived here pretty much all my life. It's not over yet, but I'm planning on spending the rest of it here. I want to thank you, Michael, for calling this meeting. It was sorely needed. Sorely needed. We've gotten some good information that we couldn't possibly have gotten from that last meeting we had. I felt injustice was done to this group of people at that meeting. They weren't able to give us this kind of information. And I liked your comment about we can disagree and still be friends. And I'd like to remind you all, this group here owns a third of the town. And they are friends. And I can attest to that because I'm constantly on the phone to Jeremy asking permission to use his 6,000 acres. And he's always been kind, generous, and obliging. And I can't say enough good about it. My family uses the land, my friends use the land, and they think I'm paying the Department of Fish and Game under the table to get these permits. We keep getting moose permits. And we're very successful up there, and we really do appreciate it. My question is, where on that timetable do you take a vote? I'd ask the whole town of Lowell. Thank you.
Well, we were told by Green Mountain Power that they would not go forward with the project if they did not have town support. So before, I mean, we had a lot of informational meetings like this where we could just present information, just so that people could see what was going on. We did have a moderator like Mike is doing, and I would think before, I mean, they obviously are not going to commit a lot of dollars to they're doing everything they can to get the permit, but past that, why should they stick their necks out if they don't have support or if they're not sure it's viable? And I think that's what they've tried to tell you by not knowing the timeline is they're still waiting. If it's viable, they're going to come to you. They're the ones that would have to tell you when they think that's going to happen.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Lowell's situation, I think once the vote went as it did, they filed for their certificate of public good.
Right off after.
And they were received that the following, so town meeting's day in March, and they received their certificate sometime in August.
John?
Just to follow up on that, do we have a commitment then from Meadowsend that if the town of Windham is not in favor of this project, that they will not go ahead with it? Is that the inference we can draw from this comment? Is that true also then of Iberdrola? That if the town of Windham is not in favor of this project, they will not go ahead with it?
Can I make a comment before you answer that? In this situation, Green Mountain Power, as an investor, made that decision, but not as a landowner. The property was not owned by Green Mountain Power, so just so everyone knows that, now I'll let you answer the question.
This is the first opportunity that we've had to have an honest and open dialogue with good information and good questions in the town. And the more of those that happen and the further we get along in the process, and the more we feel that the community has a real chance, that everybody in the community has a real chance to hear all sides of the story and get to hear what the financial impact might be and what the siting impact might be and all those other questions, then we might feel a little differently about how we answer that question. So obviously the opinion of the people in the communities is very important, but we also know that the public greater good is also an issue at hand. So I would say, I don't mean to be political about how to answer that question. I'm not going to give you the answer you want to hear right now, but we're certainly going to take it into consideration, but it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to take it into consideration when we feel that the town has, everybody in the town has had a chance to listen and that there hasn't been intimidation and other things. And we did make official requests to the public officials in the town to have one of these forums, and that was denied, or they just chose not to respond to us. So this is really the first chance we've had to talk to the people of the town. So we really appreciate that, and I hope that you'll take advantage of Melissa being around and her willingness to talk on a one-on-one basis with any of you. If people feel like it isn't much fun, I know, when your neighbors or friends or have a different opinion from you about something, it's sometimes hard to talk about that. So If you want to learn,
Just to cut through some of the misinformation here, your answer has been given to us rather clearly, which is no. The answer that you're telling us right now is no.
no at the moment, but obviously we're deeply interested in how this develops over time.
And even then, the answer is no. It depends upon whether or not you decide, not whether or not the town is in favor or against this.
The town has more direct relationship with the state and the state's decision and the boards than it does with ours. We own 5,000 acres of land that we own. It's a very unique situation here where you have one landowner with a very large amount of land with a power line running through the middle of it. And it's a lot different than if you had 12 or 13 different landowners and you were piecing something together. So it's also, as we know, it's in 3 towns. So we will weigh all of the things. We have the final decision about this project, whether we move forward with it or not. And the opinions of the people in this town will be part of the final decision that we make.
Next question. Yes.
I'm Steve Amson, and I just want to do a little follow-up on Paul Woodruff's comment. I don't have any questions at this time. I would like to say that Meadowsend, I have the greatest respect for these people. I've hunted on their property all my life. I've used their property for recreation. They've always been willing to give people that opportunity, and I think that you know, maybe the town ought to get behind them a little bit here and feel them out a little bit. I mean, don't just have a. I mean, I'm concerned. Really, what I should say is I'm pissed off because some time ago they had a meeting, and one of the town officials in this town made some statements and used their position as a town official to back up these statements, and you know, it was their personal feelings, and I just, you know, if town officials are going to be involved in this, then they should be involved as a town official.
Steve, I appreciate your comments.
Representing the townspeople, not themselves.
Thank you.
But anyway.
Others? Yes, sir.
I'm not from around here. Will I still be able to ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. I'm Justin Lindholm from Mendon, Vermont. Renewable energy credits.
I'm sorry?
Justin Lindholm.
Mendon.
Yeah, a little town up north.
Okay.
Renewable energy credits. There was an article, I think, in the Rutland Herald yesterday talking about renewable energy credits. And Vermont renewable energy credits are considered very bogus because we're using them and then we sell them for others to use them in other states. And I think there's 20-some states now that won't allow Vermont, allow people to buy, or their companies to buy these credits. Now, Connecticut is the latest one. Can't buy Vermont renewable credits anymore. What is going to happen if 49 states say Iberdrola cannot sell these renewable energy credits and are going to have to absorb them? Are they still going to build this project?
I think, you know, as I've said here earlier, we're in such an early process. What a year 9 looks like for our ability to sell our power, or how we would do that, I think just given the way in which these programs change and become redefined, it's really hard for us at this time to know what the market looks like for us for power in 8-9 years from now. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and every state I've worked in, it's changed many times over for that process. So it's really not a question I'm able to answer today, or what Vermont's future plans are with their renewable energy credits.
Another question? That's it? Bob?
Yeah, Bob Field. I'd just like to thank again the board for coming here tonight, food, and appreciate your information. It was a very good night. hope everybody in the town thinks about it. This will be some rub against right now, both ways. Okay?
Other questions? Call it a night? One more thing, I'd just like to add, with your permission, you've been a very, very respectful audience tonight, and we all appreciate that. But I want to take this opportunity to give a big hand of applause to the town of Windham. One more food, and take a piece of pizza home with you. We got some of that pizza.